not everybody who drinks to excess experiences a thing called a blackout. You wake up the next day and there's an old song called Bits and Pieces that said, "Was my boss at the party?" It was at your boss's house. That was totally me. I still hate mini blinds. I'm sober 30 years, and mini blinds still make the feathers in the back of my neck go up because I spent so much time peeking out mini blinds late at night to see what wasn't in the bushes, or the next morning to see if my car was there, and if so, what kind of shape it was in, because I didn't remember. And I find that hateful. Were you a blackout guy or no?
Oh, a total blackout guy, but I didn't realize it, for a long time. I never knew that's what I was doing. I just thought that's what happened to everybody when they drank, that at some point in the course of the evening or morning, whatever it was, that I would just go away, and I thought that's what happened to everybody. And I'd wake up the next morning not knowing, how the night had ended or whatever. And my friends would have to call and say, "Yeah, don't you remember we were out on Party Circle and, you and Jenny Long were making out with each other." And I think, man, Jenny Long, number one, I don't really like Jenny. And number two, I'm gay. So,
Okay. What city are we talking about? Where all this happened?
Well, that was in Ohio, small town Ohio,
that
where
right?
I grew
Okay.
up. Yeah.
Why do I associate you with New York?
Well, that's where I moved after I graduated from college. I learned how to drink and use when I was 15 on up, but the majority of my hardcore drinking and using happened in Manhattan when I lived there.
Is that right? When, if you don't mind me asking, when?
August of 83 to March of 95, so about 12 years, a little less than 12 years. Yeah, right after I graduated from college.
Do you know, my worst drinking was in the early 1980s in Dallas, and it was bad. The drinking age was 18. Nobody even carded you then, and it was just, I don't know how to explain to people. It's like I just sold a vintage Cadillac, a 68 Cadillac, and there were 4 cigarette lighters in it and no cup holders. We just lived in a different world.
Absolutely.
That doesn't, and part of it in Texas in the 70s and 80s was what they then called happy hour. Now, I don't know what happy hour is now if I go into, because I still play guitar in nightclubs and stuff, so they must be some kind, but what I'm talking about is, we called them mason jars. I think they were actually ball jars. And one place that I liked to go was 3 for $1 happy hour. It was like $5. They'd bring you 3 jars of liquor. Dude, 3 jars of liquor for like $5. And if you were a lunatic like me, you might go 2 or even 3 rounds. That's 9 jars of liquor over the course of an evening. And I'm told that nowadays, I sound like get off your lawn guy. I'm just saying, I hear that bartenders can now get in legal trouble for serving drinks. This was not my world.
Well, and this is what we always, I was overserved. It was never the...
There were, in my university, 1980, there were sponsored, like by Anheuser-Busch, I may have the name wrong, but substitute the name of one of those companies, sponsored chug-a-lug contests.
Yeah.
Like athletic content and just a psychotic world.
Well, the town that I went to college in actually was a tiny little town, but it had something like 40 bars in, a 10-block radius, and they all had specials. And so we knew Monday night we go to Mug and Margarita because you get a 5-gallon bucket of beer for, $8 or something like that. And the next night it was, depending on where you went. I remember one night, one of the places had what they called quad night, 4 shots for the price of 1. And a shot, I was not drinking top shelf, believe me, but a shot of, whatever it was, at the time, $1, maybe $1.25. And you get 4 of those for the price of 1. So you could get good and...
I don't know how long we want to stay on this, but you just dislodged a memory of mine. There was a bluegrass bar. They played live, really good bluegrass music in Dallas. And it seems every region, Texas in my case, has the El Cheapo brand. And where I came up, it was Pearl. That stuff was just about free. It was like $1.50 a six pack. I mean, how much cheaper can stuff get? And this Ethel's Bluegrass Club had pictures of Pearl for, I don't know, $1 or $2. It was almost free. And by the end of the night, it was like peanut shells, all over the floor, just empty little bitty plastic pitchers, billions of them knocking around on the floor.
Yeah. I loved it. And they would always have these little, cute, college girls that worked at this bar, the Mug and Margarita in particular.
I'm sorry, that was the name of the bar?
The Mug and Margarita, yeah. And,
well, that gets right to the point.
And they would bring out the 5-gallon bucket of beer, and you'd see this tiny little, freshman in college or whatever she was, carting this gigantic heavy bucket full of beer, and they put it up on the table and give you a stack of, plastic cups. And away you went. And, if you were a normal person, you'd dip your cup in and have, but, we'd just pass the whole thing around.
Brother.
Empty it out.
No, nowadays, I think here's where the business has moved. For a time, some years ago, I had a part-time day job handing out samples at Costco. I think it was Costco. I was one of those people. It was chocolates. But what I learned was because we had to be at the opening. Maybe I should bleep. I was at one of those discount enormo stores that rhymes with Bostco, and I'm a fan. I still shop there. Anyway, what I'm getting at is whatever their opening time is on weekdays. I'll call it 8 a.m. I don't remember. Might have been 7. The first wave of customers coming in, predominantly women of a certain age. Gray-haired, white-haired, with shopping carts loading up with Grey Goose bottles, the size of them, just huge.
Right.
Wandering around with gallons of booze and lots of these little old ladies. And the picture that formed in my mind was retired, outlived their husband, comfortable, nothing to do but day drink, and not wanting to let the world know, so they would tiptoe into Costco and get a day or a week or a month's supply. Did you do this? I thought I invented this in my drinking days, and it turns out in recovery meetings, you'll hear this, that I would switch up my liquor stores because I didn't want the guy on this corner seeing me 3 times a week. Right.
Yeah.
They sell liquor for a living. They don't give it, and they don't look up from their comic book. It's like, that'll be $12.
One of the many benefits of living in Manhattan was you come across 50 liquor stores between the subway and my apartment. So, I
always say it's bad to be the town drunk if your town is Manhattan.
My grandfather it still makes me laugh. My grandfather used to own a men's clothing store, haberdashery, in the downtown.
Haberdashery. Good word.
Where I grew up. And back in the day, on election day, bars were mandated to close by law.
Is that right?
Yeah,
that I never heard.
It was
okay.
It was mandated, and my grandfather used to love to stand at the front door of his store and watch the bar, across the street where all the regular old rummies would come up and try and open the door and, stand there and, knock on it and try and open it and just get all frustrated because they didn't realize that they, weren't going to get their daily tipple because the place was closed.
I have a pal who got sober in New Orleans, and he mentioned one time that the bars there only close 4 hours a year.
Yep.
And that stuck in my head, and I caught him later. I said, okay, what 4 hours? I got to ask, what are we talking about? And it has to do with Catholic holidays, Lent, or what? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, something to do with Lent or
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras.
Right
sometimes during Mardi Gras.
There's something like from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. the bars are mandated to close out of the whole calendar year.
And I think that's when they just come in with, gigantic fire hoses and just sort of spray the place down. And
I love that town. I love it. And if I lived there, I'd weigh 500 pounds because it's the best food I've ever tasted in my life. But yeah, that is a drinking town.
I'd weigh 500 pounds and I'd be drunk as the Lord.
You can get sober anywhere, but that is a drinking town. I remember I was one of the first times I was there on business. There was this sort of bodega looking thing on a corner with it seemed like there was no doors even available. It was just kind of multi-story building, and on the first floor on the corner, it was like wide open, so you could cut corners. You're not going to have a hard time figuring out where this is going. Bunch of Slurpee machines on it. I was like, boy, people sure like Slurpees. Hey, schmuck, those are daiquiris.
Yeah.
So it was a 24-hour, you know what, it was like a frozen yogurt place.
Yeah.
Pull the handle, get your daiquiri, wander out on the street.
Well, and there were drive-through daiquiri places that I came across when I was there the last time, which I couldn't believe, couldn't imagine was.
Where I came up, it was the chain called Beer Barn, and you would drive through the building like a car wash. Your car was surrounded by building on all sides, and it was legal at that time to have an open container and even to have liquor in your bloodstream. It was legal as long as you weren't blowing at whatever the number was at the time.
Well, that also was back in the time when, you'd get pulled over and the cops would say, "You been drinking tonight?"
Right there.
And you go, "Yeah, a little bit."
Yep.
Well, how far away do you live? Oh, just a couple of miles. All right, well, turn your radio up, keep your window open, and you be careful. And we go, okay.
Let's call it what it is. Where at the time of the place I grew up, it was white privilege. I was a white dude with a college degree in Dallas in the 70s. I would have thought of it in those terms, but that's how come I never got pinched. And I drove drunk a million times. It was terrible.
I'm fortunate that I spent most of my time in New York, so I didn't have to worry about driving. It was
there you go. Yeah.
But what I would always do is I would go and think, okay, I'm going to save enough money to take a cab home from the bar tonight, or tomorrow at 4 a.m. when it closes. And I'd put a $20 bill in my shoe. And I'd think, okay, that is off limits. I'm not touching that. That's my cab ride home when I'm
admirable discipline, sir.
Drunk. And it'd be closing in on, closing time. And I think, all right, I'm going to have one more. And then I'll just walk over a couple of blocks and get a cab from there. And I think,
I see. Lower your cab.
Right.
Okay.
Instead of going door to door, I'll walk a couple of blocks and then I'll get the cab. That'll allow me to buy another
this
beer.
is arithmetic I never thought of. Okay.
And then I think, all right, I'll walk halfway. And 99.9% of the time, I ended up doing the drunken, bumping into walls as you try and stumble from 11th Avenue to 1st Avenue in Manhattan at 4 o'clock in the morning, 22 beers deep.
Buddy, they got sidewalks in Texas too.
Exactly.
Kapow.
And you'd just be like doing the, what did we call it? Doing the twirl or doing I don't remember, but you were just constantly knocking into shit and, stumbling around.
I call it that guy. I used to be that guy. Oh boy, look at that guy.
Yeah. Well, I remember one time being in one of my favorite bars, and I went up and ordered another beer, and the guy kind of quietly said, 16. And I had already turned around and started to, walk away when I heard him say it, and I was like, what the? And I turned around and I said, what'd you just say? And he goes, nothing. And I said, no, tell me what you said. And he goes, just noticed that, that was your 16th beer. And I was like, yeah. Well, look at me. I'm 6'6" and I weigh 220. Of course I'm going to drink that many beers. And I, walked away thinking, what a fucking, asshole that guy is. And how dare somebody judge me 16 beers? That's not that many. Now, that didn't take into consideration the 4 or 5 shots of tequila I had before I left the apartment and the joint that I smoked on the way to, the bar and everything else.
Oh, of course. I operate on 2 tracks when we have a conversation like this. I was very ashamed. I was really, not a word you hear every day of the week anymore. I was ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was not an alcoholic. And he was a really cool guy, and I liked him, and everybody liked him. I watched him, and he got up in the morning, and he said his prayers because I could hear him at the other end of the house. And he drank his coffee, and he went to work. He came home. He took care of his family. He was nice to his kids. He paid his bills. He sat in the good chair, and he watched Bonanza, and he went to fucking sleep.
Yep.
And that was not my, that is not the life I lived. Because I just seem to have been bored with this terrible addiction. In drunk school, they called it a high propensity to addiction. Now, this was 92. So I don't know what the language is today, but I'm talking about a really credentialed MD on the West Coast running a rehab clinic. And he said they'd identified something in our genes called a high propensity to addiction, which, if I remember right, it's like, let's say you and I don't know if you have that, but I do. That if I had grown up in Saudi Arabia where there's no such thing as liquor, I'd be addicted to hashish.
Right.
What the old saying I've got is as far as I know, I've never laid eyes on heroin, but I know I'm addicted to it.
Right.
I got this pilot light down inside me that's just waiting for.
Well, and I mean, I was the kind that always would just say, people would say, "Here, do you want one?" And I go, "Sure," and they'd hand me whatever it was. And I would take it and think, I wonder what that's going to do.
Horrifying.
And I'm guessing, that I've taken birth control pills and, heartworm pills and...
Right. Baby laxative, exactly.
Right. Doan's backache pills or whatever.
BC powder comes on strong. Powder,
yeah.
Is that a Southern thing? I never heard of BC.
Okay. BC and Goodies. They're both Southern things. Goodies. But I have a Southern boyfriend. So.
Okay. Yeah, I've come to recognize or believe that I don't know what all drugs I've tried back in the day because I was taking some moron's word for it.
Yep.
Some guy who dropped out of high school who was selling whatever he was selling. He didn't know what he was selling. I didn't know what I was taking.
Yep.
And again, very ashamed. And I'm a dad. And so when I look at the nonsense I was up to as a teenager, I would kill a son of a bitch who did that to one of my kids. And
I can't imagine. I mean, I used to just think like, well, fuck them, I'm living my life and it's no concern, my parents, it's no concern of theirs. And, what's the big deal? And the older I get and the more I think about it, I realize, God, I was just a dick and I did really, really irresponsible, awful, things. And I lied and I cheated and I stole.
Terrible.
And,
it's terrible, isn't it?
In the midst of it, thinking like I'm perfectly, within my rights to do this, and don't you, judge me. And now I look back and think, oh God, how many nights did my mother lie
And here's
awake?
Here's the part you can't explain to a non-addict alcoholic is nothing else matters. And you're like, well, what about your kid's college? What about what your wife's going to say? None of that. Nothing matters. I still swim for exercise. And when it's time to get to the surface, yeah, I'd punch my mom in the face to get to the surface. There's nothing else for it. That's when the monster's awake.
Yep.
Nothing else counts. And even I've lived that life. I've lived under shameful, unconquerable addiction. And on a bad day, I'll look at somebody who's the monster's awake for them. Like, God damn it, why don't they knock it off? And I'll just forget for a minute. It is just like quitting eating food or breathing air.
Yeah.
Nothing for it. And then you get into recovery and I don't know about you, but so far been pretty easy to stay sober. Now, life has thrown me some very hard curveballs, and I have put speed bumps in my own path that fucked things up.
Sure.
But I will swear on the life of my children that I've never said, what could a bottle of tequila hurt? That hasn't crossed my mind because I was so relieved I was so happy to be let out of those chains.
It just is so tiresome. It just, for me at least, I was just exhausted because you're constantly keeping all the plates spinning, and who did I lie to and who did I tell this to and who do I owe money to and what bill am I going to not pay and how am I going to, get out of being in trouble at work for not showing up for 3 days in a row and just the constant, oh my God, I've only got half a bottle of tequila left and I haven't seen the weed dealer. And
you're speaking out of a part of my brain that's been asleep for a long time. And in our 20s, we're somewhat the same age, I guess, sounds like. Bills from the electric company and phone company, they came in the mail. There was no computers, and they would change colors. Yeah. It was like the first bill was in black type, and the next bill was in green type. By the time that shit was red, there was a drawer. When I got sober in 92, there was a drawer in my house that I was scared to look in. It was like crammed with multicolored bills because I had other stuff to do with my money.
And if I told you the number of times that my electricity was disconnected for not payment or that I was...
And that's a damn headache, getting them to turn that back on. Because I had a guy who was... I had a long time sober and he did not accost me and say, I don't know if they still do, you could pay your electric bill at the grocery store if you wanted to. He said, man, they're about to cut off my juice and you know what a you know what getting a turn back on entails. And he goes, I've got to come up with $75 to give them just to short term, keep them from shutting me down. And I said, well, I'm not sure I can do that much, but let's just go over to Tom Thumb and see if we can work a deal. And he said, actually, it'd be better if you just gave me cash. I'm like, yeah, we're done talking here. Goodbye.
Right. I mean, that's how it was. It was, what can I tell them? What story?
Right.
What can I say that I haven't said before? How pathetic can I make myself sound? I was pretty successful at it until I wasn't. Until I got to that place where, the 3-day notice to quit would be hung outside the door, or the electricity would be shut off, or the bank would close my account because I had overdrawn it too many times.
Oh, right. You know what? I got sober at that brief moment in history where I could deposit a paper check in the ATM and pull money out of it while I'm standing there.
Right.
So I wrote a rubber check to myself for $200 and I pulled $150 out.
Yeah.
Then I got thrown in rehab and I came back. It was Security Pacific in Los Angeles, one of those chains that got swallowed by a whale. And they wouldn't touch me with a barge pole. I didn't have an ATM card or a bank account for years when I got sober because I had abused the privilege, man. Nobody trusted me, and why would they? And making a living was murder because I'd been a musician and I got fired from my band for being too high to be in a rock and roll band. What does that tell you? It was a pretty good living. It was, but it was gig, get money from a show, spend the money, go do it again. Right. There was no savings account. There was no nothing.
Oh, there was never
nothing. And when I got sober, I was only able to get the kind of jobs that guys like that can get. And I remember not wanting to go to Denny's, get a job there, because I didn't want to wear a paper hat and have you walk in and I just saw you an hour ago at a meeting and I got to pour you coffee. It was my ego was not having that. So I got a job working with dogs because dogs don't care.
One of the best things that I ever did was learn how to type well, because that, no matter what, I was always able to get a job. They'd say, we run on the Wang computer system. Do you know how to use that? And I go, oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah, I'm great at that. I could type 95 words a minute, but I had no idea how the Wang system worked or how any other system worked. I would just lie and get in there and figure it out, because alcoholics, I don't know about you, but we're pretty quick on our feet. And I think,
I'm Irish. What is your ethnicity, if you don't mind?
German and Irish.
Okay, so there's an old saying that the Irish aren't smart, but they're tricky as shit.
Exactly. And I just,
Germans don't drink, do they? That's rare.
That the Germans drink? Yeah.
They got beer that you don't even need a mug for. It'll just stand up on the bar.
We're all wound type and not wrap tight. I mean, it was just, every night I'd be sitting in the bar thinking, why do all my friends have like nice houses and I don't? It's because the universe is against me. And then I'd see somebody, one of my lower companions, and be like, hey, what, and I'd be off in the next drive. Is it hot in here? I love you, and then the next thing I knew, I was blacked out and came to someplace else. And sometimes it would be, oh, wow, I'm at this really kind of cool, fun party, and some,
I got you.
Some penthouse somewhere where there's like some cute guy that's serving all kinds of drinks. And other times you'd wake up and think like, oh my God, like I don't even want to look at what's next to me right now.
To circle back around to the no money thing, I came of age in the 70s, the 1970s. It was not rare to drink and smoke weed and whatnot in my circle of friends. What was different for me is I couldn't stop, and I was a terrible addict, and it started taking everything away from me. I had other friends that when they turned 20, they switched that off like a TV set and started their lives. Yeah. And yes, they would have a drink or a little weedy weed once, but it didn't run there. It wasn't the boss in their lives. And I had a pal who he got a job at the grocery store. I don't know what a job at the grocery store paid 40 years ago, but that was, he went and got a job, and that paid for his apartment. And this is in North Texas. I went into his apartment and he was packing up ski equipment. I'm like, what is that? I hadn't seen a ski in my life. I was a million miles from a mountain. What's that? And he goes, yeah, going on a ski trip. I bought tickets and we're going with a group. And I'm like, Okay, let me try to follow this. You can get a job at the grocery store, buy an apartment, keep food in the pantry, and with the money left over, you can save that up and take cool vacations to cool places. My head spun around. I was like 20. I had part ownership of a bong and was living with mom and dad. There was no job. There was no spare money to take ski vacations. It was like speaking Martian to me. And it was a long, long time before I just kind of went, oh, that's a normal life. And what I was doing was shameful lunacy.
And I'm a smart guy, but I really was baffled by that.
I'm telling you. It stunned me.
There's got to be a black cloud hanging over me. My family must be cursed, because what else explains that? What else accounts for the fact that I'm, at that point, 25, 26 years old and have to sleep on somebody else's sofa because the sheriff came and put me out on the street. And I think, God damn it, universe, why are you doing this to me as I'm, packing the bong and doing a line and drinking
This thing of playing by the rules and living a decent life, it comes very naturally to me now. I mean, I still cuss, but other than that, I am a square from Squaresville. I was up this morning making pancakes for the kid and going to work on time and buying supplies for the workplace. And I was approached yesterday to do this really neat thing for the governor, and I'm not nothing in here to boast about. It's called being normal.
Right.
Like the rest of the world. But it's not normal for us. I feel like when you see those ice skaters, if you go to the ice skating rink, there's that person that's hanging onto the rail and trying not to fall on their ass and moving at about 1 mile an hour. That's kind of us alcoholics going through life, at least for a good long time. It does become second nature not to be an asshole, but it takes a minute.
It does. And the other thing, too, that I had to learn, sort of the hard way was this whole idea of, okay, well, I'm sober now, so everything's good and everybody has to be nice to me, without, looking at the fact that I treated people like absolute garbage for so many years, and everybody walked away from me, and understandably so. And now all of a sudden I'm, 6 weeks sober going, well, where is everybody? Why haven't, you all forgiven me and come, well,
time takes time. And you and I have been on both sides of this of, well, I gave the shit up a month ago. I'm fine. Get off my ass. Right. What's the matter with you? And what's the matter with them is they've seen what we're like for about 10 years. And time, fortunately, if you live long enough, time is the great healer.
Yeah.
And you'd have to look pretty hard. I've got one or two friends that knew me in the early 80s, and we can laugh about it now, but there's no denying that I did what I did, which is also, I think, an asset in getting sober is, and this is my first sponsor told me this, he said, look at the fact that you'll never have to wonder if it would get bad if you if you stayed on that road.
Yeah.
It was bad enough.
And it was awful. And the last
we were tough, buddy. In my 20s, I could drink a bottle of tequila.
Yeah.
I'm 63 now. If I eat a Reuben sandwich, I got to lay down for an hour and a half. I'm soft as baby shit now.
If I'm not in bed by 9:30, at this point,
I go home. Thank you, Rodney.
Boom. But I go to bed at 9:30, and it always makes me laugh because I remember in New York, like I'd work until 6, go home, and then we'd take what we called a disco nap. And, take our disco nap and then wake up and change clothes and get dressed and, leave the house at...
And maybe a little cup of coffee, wink, 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 wink.
Yeah, exactly, coffee, the powdered kind. And...
that ain't Splenda, mister.
Leave the house and get there at, 11, 12 o'clock, and the bar stayed open till 4. And, then I'd, the weave back home because I spent the 20 in my shoe. Flop backed out on the, the bed, the sofa that I was sleeping on.
The money in your shoe is the greatest. I'm going to remember that because for me, it was like, I'll save the rest until tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I was just convinced if I put it in my shoe that it'd be making much more difficult for me to have to get to it, and I would just leave it alone. Are you kidding? I
like the way you think.